First session of our new knowledge sharing series of the COOLUP program, which is funded by the International Climate Initiative of the German Ministry for the Environment. My name is Barbara Gschrey. I work for Öko-Recherche and I'm a technical and policy expert in the COOLUP team. Today's presentation is on the Montreal Protocol, its Kigali Amendment, and current international discussions. We hope you find it interesting and informative. Let's get started. The first slide shows the overview of the presentation. I will speak about the Montreal Protocol, its Kigali Amendment, the institutional setup and bodies, as well as the current topics. The Montreal Protocol is a global agreement to protect the Earth's ozone layer by phasing out the chemicals that deplete it. It was signed already back in 1987 and entered into force in 1989. It is ratified by all 197 UN parties, and it controls both production and consumption of ozone-depleting substances, the so-called ODS, in a stepwise manner. I will explain in more detail what this actually means. The other important point is that there are different schedules for the developed countries, so-called non-Article 5 countries, and the developing countries, the so-called Article 5 countries. The Montreal Protocol has been evolving over time in the light of new scientific, technical, and economic developments. There are quite relevant achievements that have been reached already. The parties to the Montreal Protocol have phased out 98% of the controlled ODS globally compared to the 1990 levels. And these control measures are estimated to have reduced the greenhouse gas emissions by 135 billion tons of CO2 equivalents in the period from 1990 to 2010. And with the full implementation of the Montreal Protocol, the ozone layer is expected to recover by the middle of this century. This slide illustrates how the Montreal Protocol links to other environmental agreements. In the bottom, you can see that the halocarbons are first produced, then used, banked in equipment and products, and then finally these reach their end of life. Emissions of halocarbons occur throughout the entire life cycle. Some of the halocarbons used are ozone-depleting substances, and these substance groups are listed here in the red writing. They also contribute to climate change. Some of the ozone-depleting substances alternatives in green writing are also contributing to climate change, but not to ozone depletion. The Montreal Protocol controls ODS production and consumption, as mentioned earlier. The Kigali Amendment controls HFC production and consumption. In contrast to these, the UNFCCC and Paris Agreement looks at the reduction of F-gas emissions. These comprise not only HFCs, but also PFCs and some other fluorinated gases. But they do not look at the production and consumption level, but only at the emission level. This slide shows some technical developments and the consequences of the Montreal Protocol. Initially, CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, were used in many applications. As a first consequence of the Montreal Protocol, HCFCs were introduced as substitutes in certain applications. This started from about 1990 onwards. Both CFCs and HCFCs feature ozone depleting potential, ODP, as well as high GWP, global warming potential. The Montreal Protocol has since led to the introduction of HFCs, hydrofluorocarbons, in the blue box. They don't have an ODP any longer, but feature high GWP. Now and in the future, we might be facing different developments. HFOs, hydrofluoroolefins, have been introduced as alternatives to HFCs and the other ODS still in use, but also natural refrigerants are alternatives. HFOs don't show any ozone depleting potentials, but low global warming potential, whereas natural refrigerants don't have either. The graph on the right illustrates the way how the decrease in HCFC consumption, blue line, has kind of encouraged also the growth of HFC consumption. This is the orange line on the top. The Kigali Amendment is focusing on HFCs and the alternatives to HFCs. The 2016 Kigali Amendment entered into force actually in 2019. And just lately, the status is that 122 countries have ratified it. It establishes the phase down of HFCs by cutting their production and consumption in a similar way as formerly the Montreal Protocol that looked at the HCFCs and CFCs. HFCs have been introduced as alternatives to HCFCs and CFCs in the past, and they are potent greenhouse gases, so they have a high climate impact. They are used widely in air conditioners, refrigerators, aerosols, foams, and also other products. And the goal of the Kigali Amendment is to reduce HFC consumption and production by over 80% by 2047. This is done in different ways in Article 5 and non-Article 5 countries. Different HFC phase-down schedules apply. This slide illustrates the different steps. And as you can see, it is not a full phase out in contrast to the ozone depleting substances used in the past, but it is a phase down, which means that there's a tail consumption, some remaining level of consumption foreseen also beyond 2050. Within those two country groups, developing countries and developed countries, there are also subgroups that have different conditions for the phase down schedules, different start dates, and different steps down. As I mentioned earlier, developing and developed countries have different phase down and phase out schedule. This slide shows that actually parallel commitments to phase out HCFCs and to phase down HFCs are in place. And in particular, in the period between 2021 and 2030, the Article 5 countries will be simultaneously implementing both phase out and phase down of ODS and HFCs. This is very relevant to keep in mind because the same sectors and in many places also the same stakeholders are concerned. This gives also the opportunity for leapfrogging, which means that a switch from HCFCs to non-HFCs is actually possible and can be done during this period. The activities in the phase down plans for HFCs and in the past for the phase out for HCFCs in the so-called HCFC phase down management plans are quite similar. And an integrated compliance strategy could actually help the Article 5 countries plan and ensure an efficient and coordinated implementation of those two parallel commitments in line with the national circumstances and priorities. I'm coming to the institutional setup and bodies now. For the Montreal Protocol, the Ozone Secretariat is a key body. It is based in Kenya, housed within the UNEP. It is the administrative office that organizes all the conferences and manages the implementation of decisions. It also is the hub for information and knowledge related to the production and consumption of ODS. The meeting of the parties, MOP, brings together all the contracting parties. The main functions include the review of the implementation of the protocol, the establishment of guidelines for the reporting, the review of requests, the assessment of control measures, and also the budget-related issues. Every year, the ordinary MOP meetings are held. For these meetings, a bureau is established, which is composed of a president, 3 vice presidents, and a rapporteur. This bureau meets typically ahead of the MOP to organize the work that is coming up. There's also a so-called open-ended working group, OEWG, which prepares the meetings of the parties and reviews the reports that are provided by different assessment panels and prepares also draft decisions. The meetings of the OEWG take place at least once every year. A recent meeting just took place online in the period from 22 May to 17 July. A link can be seen on the left. A number of assessment panels is established. These have been vital components of the ozone protection since the Montreal Protocol got started. And these assessment panels, they support the parties with different types of scientific, technological, and financial information in order to help reaching decisions. These assessment panels are, of course, performing their assessments in respective fields. Most importantly, there's a scientific assessment panel, SAP, a technology and economic assessment panel, TEEP, and an environmental effects assessment panel. And all of these assessment panels are presenting their key findings every 4 years in a consolidated synthesis report. Furthermore, there's an implementation committee. This committee is receiving, considering, and reporting on any submissions by the parties, and also on information and observation that is collected and forwarded by the Secretariat for the preparation of the reports. The implementation committee is comprised of 10 parties and is elected by the MOP. And then there's also a big structure around the financial mechanism. This financial mechanism was created by the London Amendment, and it is to provide the financial and technical assistance, including the transfer of technologies to A5 parties, so that they can reach compliance with the control measures. This financial mechanism includes the Multilateral Fund, MLF, but may also include other means of multilateral, regional, or bilateral cooperation. The relevant institutional body is the Executive Committee, which is responsible for overseeing the operation of the MLF. As for current topics being discussed, energy efficiency is a key topic at the moment. For your background, there has been a decision already back in 2019 that the TEEP should prepare a report for consideration by the MOB that took place last year. And this report should address any new developments with respect to best practices, availability, accessibility, and cost of energy efficient technologies in the different sectors. And the parties explicitly recognize the importance of energy efficiency. Therefore, the Kigali Amendment was seen as a renewed opportunity to enhance and to maintain energy efficiency so that significant additional climate benefits could be reached. And the coordination between the refrigerant transition on the one hand and the energy use reduction is seen crucial to prevent also lag-in effects and help linking with other policy measures. At the recent OEWG meeting in July, a TEEP task force report was presented. You can see the link here. I found that it is not complete in a way that not all applications are covered. So, for example, heat pumps were missing. And also the concept for funding energy efficiency is still unclear in my view. The other relevant topic that has been discussed or is being discussed at the moment relates to CFC 11 emissions. For your background, the global phase out of the production and consumption of CFC 11 in 2010 has led to the idea that also the emissions would decrease steadily. However, in 2018, research provided evidence of an unexpected increase in these CFC 11 emissions in the period from 2014 to 2016. Two decisions from the MOB were made subsequently. So one was to request the scientific assessment panel to provide the parties a summary report on this unexpected increase of CFC 11 emissions. And the other one was to request the Technological and Economic Assessment Panel to update on the CFC 11 banks, so the links between the production of HF and CTC, different types of CFC 11 products, the disposition of these products, and also methods and opportunities for detecting these, as well as possible drivers of illegal production and trade. This slide contains a short summary of the scientific assessment panel report on the unexpected CFC 11 emissions. So this unexpected increase first emerged in 2013 and continued until 2018. And then emissions declined again. Current and future CFC 11 emissions depend on the magnitude of the bank that exists and also the release rates. It should be noted that the estimates of these CFC 11 banks are very uncertain, so it is difficult to assess the release rates from the banks and how they vary over time. Also, quantifying unreported production and its future impact on emissions is not so easy and requires an improved understanding of the bank emissions that exist today from the pre-2010 production, but also from the production since 2010. It is estimated that the anticipated recovery of the ozone depletion will not be substantially delayed because the unexpected increase in emissions took place only in a 5-year period. The report also contains some information on CFC 12 emissions and CTC emissions. Both are not elaborated in the same detail as the CFC 11 emissions. And then there was the other report, the TEEP task force report on the unexpected emissions of CFC-11. So the inventory-based estimated expected CFC-11 emissions compared with the global derived emissions indicate that actually some unreported emissions and production and use took place, possibly from 2007 onwards. There are estimates on the magnitude, so the cumulative total is estimated between 320 and 700 kilotons. And it is when assuming use in closed cell foam production, this cumulative unreported CFC-11 production leads to an increase in the bank of about 300 kilotons. The opportunities to recover these CFC-11 quantities from products are limited to the actual banks that are active. And these are insulation foams and to a lesser extent, centrifugal chillers. The opportunity for recovery and destruction lies in higher or better management of the foam banks at the end of life, and potential diversion of the foam waste from landfill towards destruction. However, the investment and operating costs in waste recovery and destruction represent a challenge compared, of course, with the cheaper forms of dispositions, which include venting and landfill. So it can be seen that these future economics and environmental imperatives might improve the end-of-life choices. But it also underlines that actually the burden of CFC-11 is not gone yet. And with that, I'm at the end of my presentation. I thank you for your interest in this first knowledge sharing session of the CoolUp program. And if you'd like to see more, follow us on Twitter at WeAreCoolUp, where we will post about future knowledge sharing sessions, project activities, and all kinds of news on sustainable cooling. And thanks again for your attention.